Hi everyone, this is Carlos Wante, back for Creature Talk Part 3. Today I'm going to talk about the engineers, the opening sequence for Prometheus, and I'm going to go over a couple other boarded sequences that I did that didn't make it into the film. One that did, but the version of it that didn't make it in. And with that, let's just get right into it. This is the opening sequence, and I'm sure you guys have seen this before, but maybe not explained. And I'm going to talk about actually the music playing in the background is a piece that I recorded along with 4 other tracks that I recorded for all my artwork to pitch it to Ridley. This particular track is called Night in the Caspian Desert. And it's titled that way because I imagined that this entire sequence, if it happened on Earth, that I imagined that it could happen in the area uh, near, or somewhere near anyways, the Fertile Crescent area, the Mesopotamian area. And I picked the Caspian Sea, but I imagined at this time it would be a desert with just a pond. Um, so I called it the Night in the Caspian Desert. So a cool little note here that Ridley did use all my music to pitch all this work to the studio. You can find all the tracks on my Sound Cloud page under the title of NPM 40, and it's under in an album actually called Titan. And with that, let's just start talking about the artwork now. So here you can see Ridley had an idea that there would be a pyramid breaking through the atmosphere and coming to, if this was Earth or maybe a moon, didn't know yet, that it would deposit these engineers. They weren't engineers yet, but these 3 beings, and one of them would break off to ceremonially sacrifice himself uh, for the sake of life, right? So he would give his own genetic material up so that way to plant life in this barren planet, which could have been Earth, or it could have just been something that happened on a moon somewhere. I don't know. We didn't know. It was just the idea of the imagery. I didn't know where it fit, but this turned out to be the opening to the film. So uh, now I'll go over what I drew here based on that information that Ridley gave me. So I drew the pyramid as it would be bursting through, punching through the atmosphere and bursting through these clouds is kind of tearing through, uh, and it's a ship, right? So I imagined that after it broke through, it'd be a beautiful shot of this thing bursting through the clouds, and then it would just this shadow of the pyramid would just, it's moving across the landscape really fast, and then we would cut uh, to these 3 just standing in front of or underneath in front of this the pyramid, and I wanted it to be like 2001, so you would have this shot of them just standing there and a plucking of a bass, bump 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 bump, kind of a thing, you know. And I imagined that there would be, and they kind of did that in Planet of the Apes too, the original Planet of the Apes with Charlton Heston, when they were walking through the landscape and discovering things, and there was just these plucks of a note as they were discovering things. Um, I like that a lot because it gives the illusion and the feeling that something is not necessarily right, you know. Um, and I wanted that here. Um, I thought that that would be pretty cool. I mean, wanted. This is the way I imagine. I'm not the director, so I'm overstating that. I imagined, I should say, that it would be something like that, and that's what I was pitching to Ridley. So pyramid comes, we watch it tear across the landscape, deposits these 3 engineers, one of them standing in front of the other 2. Uh, he breaks away and he has something in his hand. He walks towards this pond. which we see him, doing something here, and then you see him lift up this bowl, and you're wondering, okay, well, what the heck is going on here? We don't even see where these guys are anymore because they're over here to the side. Um, so here he has a bowl, and full disclosure here, my idea was that I wanted this thing to actually it would be like a tip of the hat to the egg, the alien egg. Uh, but I didn't have time to draw it, and I just told Arthur that was my idea, but I never had a chance to get to it because it wasn't my particular job at the time. Immediately after this, I was jumping on the Ultramorphs and designing those. They were my first hit on this project, was designing the Ultramorphs, and the Deacon was the first one of those that I went to. So, and which would have been a primitive xenomorph, and then I jumped on the giant xenomorphs, which would be the Ultramorphs. Trying to sort out all that stuff, so I didn't have a chance to draw this out. So I drew this down very quickly, and so I drew this afterwards because I wanted it in there because it was my idea that I never got to do. So just letting you know. So my idea was that there would be this egg and it would also be kind of tip of the hat to Alien, when they were doing the hunt, when Dallas is crawling through the air ducts, and the doors would shut like giant shutters, right? So there was something I was just playing with, these neat little geeky connections to the film, right? Which was my intent the entire time. With everything I did on Prometheus and Covenant, I was really just trying to attach everything to Alien. Uh, um, so with this, he would pull this little piece off here, and this shutter that's in the shape of an egg would all slide down fast and reveal the contents inside of this bowl. And almost immediately, this stuff would oxidize in some way that it would become airborne, and it would know to enter the mouth of this being because it's going to be the host. It's designed that way. It'd go in his mouth, and it would eat him from the inside out and join with his genetic material to activate it, his genetic material, and mix into this pond. All that would fall, and life would come out of this pond, and that could be plant life. It could be animal. You know what I mean, like a mud skipper. It could be anything. We didn't, that hadn't been worked out yet. So that was the idea for all this. So, and as I'll show you, what I was thinking of a good way to tell that story would be that they would visit a second time. And I'll show you here when I talk about the engineers. But first, I'm going to go through a little bit of storytelling of how I started on the engineers with Ridley and how I started on the project. Just because there's a reason why. And so when Arthur called me for this project, Arthur Max, the production designer, and I say this with a bit of humility, that Arthur called me and he told me that Ridley is starting work on a prequel to Alien, and that Ridley had been looking at tons of portfolios, and that he saw my work and he wanted me to be the creature guy. And of course I was flattered and humbled all at the same time, and excited. Of course I was juiced. I couldn't wipe the smile off my face for days. So some of the work that he had seen was this stuff, along with a couple other things that I'll show you, or one other thing in particular. So he really loved this image here, and he loved this, and something about this area here, not the monstery stuff. He liked that there was a man attached to all this madness going on here, right? Um, and I had no idea why, but he just really liked this. So I made a page with all of this stuff on it, and I brought this to him when I was going to have my first meeting with him. So I brought this to my first meeting with Ridley, and he had seen another image that they pulled up that was an image I had done for another project years before, and it was for a game. And since he liked it, I actually went over it and slightly changed it and brought him a print of that also. Uh, and that's this image. And this image actually has gotten a lot of mileage, oddly. But he really liked this and that it was a giant whale. And then I was told that there's going to be giant whales in the project when I was meeting with Ridley. He was telling me all this stuff. We were, talking about everything. And some of you will recognize this as the alien or something like the alien in Arrival, because Denis really liked this image also. So I used this and the silhouette, anyways, and created the alien for Arrival. So we talked about this. I went away, and then I came back for my second meeting with him after looking at some of the reference that he was showing me that he liked. Some of it I saw what he liked, but I didn't like the images themselves. But I was trying to kind of pull little pieces out of there that I thought were cool and try to see what he was finding interesting about them. And so I went away, and when I came back for another meeting, I brought this image to him, which was based on the idea that these were giant beings, potentially anthropomorphic, but not necessarily. This head is related to something that he really liked. There's an innocence to it, small mouth, eyes, it's looking up. But, and I put this here, this covering over the torso, the rib cage area to imply like the alien dome, the xenomorph dome. And and then he had mentioned to me something about them being more human, and so he went back to this stuff, and he told me he really liked this, and he's thinking of them being more like men now and less like whales, which I said okay, and I didn't know that these were going to be the pilot, the space jockey standing up yet, right? He was kind of talking about that, but none of that was really clear. We were kind of talking about that, but I didn't know that these guys were going to be inside of this, the guy in the suit yet. I mean, by the second meeting, I think it was made more clear that as they weren't going to be these giant whales anymore, and that they were going to be these men that were going to be the pilot, and that was going to be, they were going to be wearing that bony surface as a suit. I thought, okay, wow, okay, but he didn't want them to have those proportions, to be less monstrous and more like these benevolent beings, kind of a thing. So, a bit of a challenge. I mean, if it were me, I would take that thing, stand it up, that was in the chair, stand it up, and use those proportions and make something really, really weird, right? And I would have fun with that, but it would be very alien. It would be very, very bizarre, right? But we weren't going there. He wanted it to be a man, and possibly this screwed up, and also a sense of arrogance about them, right? That he was talking about, with me. And so I went with all that. And I sketched this little sketch. And then as I did this, and the reason I have this here is because it's the first sketch thinking of them. and trying to bring some of this into it. And I just thought to myself, this isn't going to work. It's just, how the heck do I make this stuff work? All that information that he gave me, you know, and liking these things here, how do I make that work? Um, this one, just drawing this, kind of helped me to see the problems I was going to be facing. Uh, so, all that being said, I decided to try to ignore a lot of that. Without ignoring it, I would still have it there in the back of my mind, but I wasn't going to let it become a roadblock. I was just going to drive right through it and not worry about it too much and try to sort it out as I went. And if I didn't draw this, I didn't, and I wasn't going to worry about it. I just kept on going. So, first image. Now, this also has some storytelling to it. Uh, I imagined that now that you've seen the opening that I showed you for Prometheus, right? Where the engineer sacrifices himself, with the bowl of stuff that became, airborne and went into his mouth. Excuse me. That I imagined that the two other engineers, the other beings didn't know they were engineers at the time, that they got back in their ship, they left, and then they came back like years later, like maybe, I don't know, 1,000 years later, to see, and they would do this on other worlds. They would monitor them, and so I imagine that they came back, and this is that story of them coming back. One is come off away from the other two again to see what is happening, and this would be the Caspian area, right? So in this illustration, I actually have this kind of prehistoric landscape that is inspired by the Renaissance paintings, some of Leonardo's paintings, and then even some of the more recent stuff from Rembrandt, where some of the landscapes looked prehistoric, And then even more recently, some of the big landscape, like Bierstadt and some of the other guys that did these, the big, these huge landscape paintings at the turn of the century, late 1800s. Um, and they had this prehistoric kind of quality about them. And so really liked that a lot. So I loved it, So I just implied it. I'm not a landscape painter, but so I just implied it in the background. And so my idea with this engineer is that the technology had actually become part of them, so much so that they can control their parts. So this particular engineer is actually has his hands floating out for a reason. As he walks over to see this life that they created, uh, these are like nudibranches. Again, not unlike the grass blade uh, um, um, vegetation that I was talking about in Creature Talk Part 2 when they landed in paradise, that the grass blades were like nudibranches, but they weren't independent of the ground. They were stuck, right? Uh, these were free and independent. They could walk around like a real nudibranch. And so in this one, this little sequence here that I thought would be really, really cool, this guy walks into the scene, and you see these things walk in from out of scene, and they're walking towards him. So they're walking in towards each other, and he's looking at these things, and he puts his hands out, and one of these little plants blooms, and it has this little red area that explodes out and shoots like a tongue and kills one of his hands. And he stands back, and he kind of, he looks pleased with what just happened. And in the air, you see another hand appear. He grows another hand, and then they leave again. And then we would cut to the film, right? Present day or whatever that, in the future, when they're in the ship, the humans now. And I thought that would have been a really good way to tell the story of what happened with the sacrifice, and then to show them come back and observe the life that is now starting on this planet or moon, whatever, right? Because we still didn't know. I didn't know yet. Um, anyway, so pretty neat. I thought this would be pretty cool. So going with that, I kept on going with this idea and with a different version of an engineer, trying to play up the big arms, but making them more like flattened flesh areas that look like wings almost. Here he is with separated parts, but this being would move all together, and just as if he had a connected joints. But the idea was to push the idea that these things were more than just a natural uh, being um, similar to us, in that I wanted them to feel almost like I wanted them to feel like something more than just um, another humanoid. I and so I imagine that's why I'm saying I imagine that their technology is part of them. So much so, I mean, we're kind of going there, right? In little, in small ways, with with just replacing parts, plastic surgery. There's all this stuff that we're becoming the idea of transhumanism, right? Um, is becoming a thing, and so I imagine that these guys, they're so much further ahead that there has to be some evidence of that um, in them, and where it's something else. And so who knows if these guys really die, and that's why I was a little disappointed that some of the engineers were dead in the ship when they discover, the cryotubes of them, all there, and there's only one alive. Um, I don't mind if they got killed by their experiments. I think that's pretty good. Uh, but you know, I wish that they had that maybe they had opened up some of the other pods, and we saw that they were like there was, that they were burst open and they were killed by uh, um, their creation. So here's another, just a quick sketch of me trying to make that work. Uh, Design of the head, inspired by South American Indians, Mexico, and central area there where the Mayans and the Aztecs, sorry, Mayans and the Aztecs uh, were experimenting with the bricks, uh, to elongate the head, and uh, and I thought that would be a really neat kind of connection to the natural world that we know. Um, and I think this would have been really beautiful. I mean, regardless of what ever happened with what they did with the face, even if they wanted it to make that. I mean, even in this one though, I'm kind of trying to make it look a little like a Greek sculpture with the nose bridge and the soft-looking mouth, right? Um, but I still wanted it to look alien, not uh, not xenomorph. I mean just alien, right? And I also some kind of connection to the Schwa alien with the big black almond eyes. Uh, there's something here. When you would see it in the front, it would look like say like you know, a, a V-shaped inverted V, or actually just a V-shaped head, right? A triangular head. Again, same thing. Nose bridge, trying to make it look very South American. Uh, and the reason, because it's old, and we know it. We know it as old. We know it as ancient here. So there's some connection for people to make. Uh, in this one, related to the sculpture that I showed you, which had the shoulder kind of pushed forward, um, but here with the anatomy. But this is showing how the engineer would also be wearing the helmet, which would look very much like the pilot, but not worked out entirely. But that it shows the plant killing his hand, and he's just watching it kill the hand. Um, And I would imagine that he can detach himself from the pain uh, by uh, removing, with this area of space here, he could actually remove his connection to it and the feeling. So he could allow this to happen without him feeling any pain. Um, so here you can see that I made it less alien and more human here. More relating now to uh, some of the information that we were getting, that they were going to be less alien and more human. Not human, but, humanoid rather than this kind of crazy structure here. And this was my offering, thinking that I still felt that it needed to be fantastic, and I wanted it to be more like the thing in the chair. If that's going to be the case, then we should really go there. And this is more like the proportions of the being in the chair. And I'm kind of massaging this area to find a way to really push uh, away from it just being a humanoid um, with 2 arms and 2 legs, right? And you could say that this thing looks angelic almost, because it looks a little bit like a manta. Its shoulders it has faux shoulders here that connect right into the rim of the wing, and its actual shoulders and arms are here. This could be pretty cool, and here he is with as they land to uh, welcome their life that they have created, or to, you know, see what was going on here on their planet that they implanted life on. Uh, and this is a technological perspective on them, which I went here. Now, understand, uh, I don't just, I'm not just coming up with ideas to come up with them here. So I have a bunch of ideas to give to the client. I have to like every single one of these things. And there has to be a reason behind every one of these things. I'm not trying to make my packages my delivery packages fat every week to show that I'm working hard. I'd rather give them stuff that I like. So I may take time to come up with an idea. And one image may take me longer than the other, right? So um, the idea was that I was trying to make sense of all the alien head and all that. And then I took this very kind of, and I don't know how to describe it, and because I can't call it terrestrial, it's more of a technological approach with all this stuff. So there would be nothing magical or more than human. They would just be these beings uh, that were like us, but more advanced technologically, right? But it's very boring. I mean, I see this in every single science fiction film. I mean, Star Trek has done it to death. Not to death, because I do like Star Trek. Uh, um, and the original series. And but so I had to go here to show it so I could talk about it, right? To Ridley, and share my ideas and why I don't think this is the way to go. So someone else wouldn't come up with this idea, and a bad idea, a version of this, and pitch it and make them like it. I wanted to pitch it and own it, so to shoot it down, because I didn't think that this was a good idea. I wanted something more like this. Um, and so I took this idea and this idea, right? And I started to smash them together. Um, but and now here's an idea with this character would be wearing like this costume that's like he's alive. This would be moving. You know, he's got the helmet on that would suggest the pilot, and his parts float. So he's more than human. He's something else. Uh, but it implies a lot of the xenomorph kind of, filigree to a degree, not exactly, just kind of putting something in there, right? And I think that this would have been pretty cool. This is actually probably my favorite direction to go into. Uh, I should say one of my favorites, and I'll show you why. Because I'm still talking about this, and we're going to get to that with this character right here, this version. So the combination of this and this is this guy, in that this version here is just part of the entire idea. This alien, and looking kind of like these. I wanted them to almost feel like they had a confidence, and they're benevolent beings that are very proud, right? In this idea here, and he would always have a suit on that would be a living being that is a fabricated living being, obviously, because they're wearing this suit that is living, and it keeps them alive. This suit would help them to breathe in any atmosphere, wherever they went. So the traveling engineers, right, would be in these suits, and it would fossilize with the being inside, and that's why you'd have the guy in the chair, because the suit that he was wearing fossilized with him in there. That's why it would look like there was a skeleton, and then you'd have this biomechanical looking kind of filigree that wasn't necessarily him, but it was the suit. In this particular suit, I don't have any of that filigree on because I didn't get far with this idea. It was just this pitch, right, of this one idea amongst others. So the other idea was that, so here he is inside of a suit, that these, he has 6 fingers, right, not unlike the alien, that these tentacle-looking shapes back here would be there for a reason. They would be kind of swinging and floating in the air, and they would emit this charge that would create kind of a volume of technology that would float around them, that they could just, just by thinking about it, they could, kind of scroll through this floating grid that's a circular grid and activate, do things, you know what I mean? Open up the ship wherever they're at, do stuff, right? So that was the idea. So it would be telepathic kind of technology, but it would appear also like not unlike the holographic display in the control chamber that David activates, right? When he walks into the ship in Prometheus, where he touches the eggs and plays the flute, and then the hologram or the holographic display opens up. Something like that, but not as grand as that, but something that would even create like a mist around them. That's an electrical field, possibly, but that manifests like a cloud, and the technology would float. And symbols would float within that cloud, and it would all be created by these 2 things here on this suit. I don't know, something else. That's all. Here's another view of that suit here with the flaps coming down to make it look like angelic wings. This one in particular, now, this idea I like a lot. And like I said, it's near my favorite and one of my favorites, but this one in particular is the way I really felt like it would be something else, and it would help me to sell the idea of this guy actually being the same as the guy in the chair, I could still play with this idea, and like not even necessarily this particular image, but playing with this and massaging it to really work directly with the guy in the chair in this as the space jockey, right? So here's another idea for the South American look for the head, which could be this guy too. Sure, that head could be in here. I mean, look, this guy's got the long head here, right? You can see he's got a nose, same thing. So this head or the last head that I had to show you that's very South American could work. This head could work inside of there too. Another idea was that they actually had no faces at all, and they were these faceless giants. And I really started to push this idea because the alien had 4 fingers and 2 thumbs, and so one of the things was that the Nephilim had 6 fingers. Uh, if you guys don't know what Nephilim are, when David fought Goliath in the biblical story, David was one of 5 giants. When David picks up the stone to kill Goliath, he has 4 other stones. He's ready to take on the entire family, and Goliath is described as having 6 fingers. So I thought that was a really cool tie-in and something that we could use, another historical connection uh, to Earth, right? So, and they're giants, right? Dave, Goliath is a giant. These are giants. They all have 6 fingers. Uh, so anyway, this idea is more of an animal kind of being from another planet, rather, uh, and just more naturalistic, right? And going with that they would have these Art Nouveau kind of uh, beautiful clothing with stars on them. They're star people. 6 fingers, 4 fingers, 2 thumbs. I mean, um, this is a sculpture I did, and I just photographed it and then added it into this illustration here with the hood on. Um, this image here is the first one that I did this and with a filter and made it white here. And Ridley really responded to the idea that this edge right here was actually on purpose, that I felt that there would be a rage uh, of the edge. Now, that's the only way I can describe this in a very illustrative way. I'm sorry. But so I'm going to try to explain that. My idea was that these things would be slightly out of focus when they appeared, and their edges would be like they were boiling, uh, and that's why this edge is so broken here. And I thought it would be really interesting if there was like a broken edge. It would make them feel godlike, something else, because they're so far ahead of us. We would look at them as like being like angelic creatures that are way beyond us, right? And well, really liked this and responded to the idea that it was white. And I think shortly after this is when he came up with the idea that they could be made out of that they that humans actually tried, that we had seen these beings, and all of the sculptures from the Hellenistic to the Renaissance would be in response to that impression that humans had, where they did all the marble sculptures with these very um, idealized and beautiful looking faces, like the David sculpture, and then some of the earlier Greek sculptures from the Hellenistic. If you look at all they came up with that, that nose bridge that comes straight off of the forehead, um, and I think that's where, and and then so Ridley went there. Based on this, he went to the idea that it should look like David. The idealized human is actually based on an engineer. So you can blame me for that with this image here. The idea of David, it looking like, marble statue, I think is cooler in theory than it is in application. That's just my opinion. I think they needed to be more fantastic than that, but I like the idea. I mean, the attachment, right? The historical attachment is kind of cool. I mean, but it didn't really work well in application, in my opinion. So this is just an idea in me trying to think of how their technology would work with them and would appear in our uh, in three-dimensional world, but maybe it looks two-dimensional, and so it would be really alien, right? I mean, uh, and this is really South American looking. I thought, what if there was this band that just appeared out of nowhere around the arm of the engineer as it was doing something, uh, and in one act in particular, say that a certain band of energy would form around him. Um, I don't know, I was just trying to come up with ideas, and I thought that was pretty wild. Uh, this one is where these markings would appear on their faces, and I didn't know if this was, and this is as far as I got. Okay, so I'm not even going to try to explain it. I didn't know if this was necessarily their own tattoos that they had on themselves that was particular to each engineer or something else. But there you go. I was just trying to find a way to make these things look like they were more than us. That's all. Sculpture I did to try to pitch the idea of the more naturalistic approach, I should say. And here's one that looks kind of like the Greek or Italian Renaissance idealistic kind of pretty man face kind of a thing with their sculpture. And Roman also, the Roman nose, Italian. Complete with the wreath, indication of the wreath, tie to history. All that is really cool idea, but not necessarily, I don't know if it worked in application again. My idea for this is that, not unlike what I was talking about with the squid skin, that one engineer, when the tentacles would create a field of technology, this one would have these two familiars that would just, spin around him. And they were, wherever he went, these things would be just spinning around him. And by his will, they would spin faster and create a field of technology that was like a dome around his head, is what I imagined. And in that field, he could see, well, for lack of a better expression, video, and or communicate with the other crew, or whatever. You know what I mean? He could issue commands, whatever. I mean, it's just a field of technology for multi-purpose, right? I, there it is. And that's what I was thinking with this. I thought this would be something else. It's more than what we know here today. That's all. Again, just trying to push it. I did this because it had to be done, and I wanted them to see it so I could show that this isn't the way to go. Much more naturalistic, very typical alien way to approach this. Not alien xenomorph, I mean alien as in, being from another world. So I did this just to go there. It's very, very naturalistic and complete with clothing and everything. All this stuff is, So I did this because I had this offshoot idea that what if these giant beings, as now I knew that they were going to appear as ghosts and holograms running through the halls of this space station where the crew go in, find their way into in Prometheus. I imagined, what if they were these these asexual looking creatures, right? They were these beings that had nothing to do with either sex at all. So I looked around to find reference for very androgynous looking people, right? And I found one photograph that I had to chop up and use, and that's what this is from. And I think that this would be a really interesting way to go, as maybe the being inside of the suit, right? Maybe a little bit more augmentation here, but if they wanted it to look very humanoid, then something like this would have been really interesting, in my opinion. Because you can almost relate to it, but you can't at the same time. It's just off enough to where you're kind of looking at it like, and it's familiar, but it's not at the same time. I mean, I would add another thumb actually on this side, and I would have gone further, but this was just a really quick thing that I slipped in, and I really loved it, actually. But of course we didn't use it. But I mean, he did love this idea. Here I had to do it, took the photograph of I found of David sculpture and gave it the schwa eyes, the schwa eyes, and gave it some of that Art Nouveau colored costume here. Um, I yeah. So ideas for the exploding head now. Uh, I thought it actually should start to go alien before it exploded, um, and I pitched the idea of it even going further. Uh, you know, to really blowing up and turning into what almost looked like the baby head, or even the the deacon. Uh, something. I just felt it needed to kind of insinuate the that the black goo had something to do with the alien. Um, so that's what this is about. Okay, so preview. So now we're going to Covenant. Now that those were the engineers, ideas for the engineers, and so now we're going to Covenant. In Covenant, in the first version of the script, uh, uh, and actually in the final film they kind of implied it, but they didn't go there. But in the first version of the script, David experiments on the engineers themselves. I guess he finds one kind of alive, and he starts experimenting on this one. And if you look in the movie, the actual released version of Covenant, you'll see that there's this, there's a corpse of a engineer standing there in the corner, um, and he's just filleted. I mean, which is it's really wrong. An android is able to do all this stuff, uh, but so these are ideas for. I mean, this was an idea for a minute, and we went through this within 1 week. So I should say I went through this in 1 week because I was designing all the creatures at this point. So my first idea was that he would be almost it's not successful, right? So he wouldn't be able to move fast, but he would be an intact being, and not a weird mutant creature with one big arm and all that sort of kind of stuff, right? Um, but he still wouldn't be very athletic, and able to, you know, cause mayhem on the planet. He would just be locked away and, kind of a being. So this is an idea for that. Here's another idea for that same kind of, take on this engineer. And here I have it like his face has been screwed around with where, the nose is gone. It looks tortured. And I started to get a little bit more fantastic here, just because, David is screwing around. He's doing whatever the heck he wants at this point. So why not? And then I went really far and thought, well, what if he went really far and he created a whole new being from an engineer, you know? And I mean, this guy wouldn't be able to do very much because he's kind of limited. But I mean, he could. In the story, I don't think there was any activity with this thing. It was just locked away in a cage, kind of this pathetic creature that was there. And I think is more like it just wanted to die, kind of a thing. Uh, so this is my my imagining that this thing would actually have a part to play, where it would possibly have a run-in with the xenomorph, and the xenomorph would kill it. And I mean, and afterwards, that xenomorph would have it out with the neomorph, and it would kill that as well. Uh, so um, this guy he would play more of a part in the film. So there it is. These are the engineers and my ideas for the engineer experiments. So from this, we can go to a couple short little things here. I'm going to go over this Hammerhead attack with Milburn and Fifield. Go over these boards. And here you could see where this is Milburn, with the snake. They made this, so this isn't actually in the film. You know, uh, actually they're out of order too. Something happened here. So let's go here first. This is where the snake grabs him, tears a hole right here into his suit. In the movie, he breaks his arm. This guy, Fifield, comes and cuts the head off, and we see the head grow back. Goes into just like the film. I mean, this is the film. The only thing different that I wanted, and I was happy that they did this, that I wanted him shaking his head, trying to escape in some way this thing trying to get into his mouth. And so I wanted him moving his head, and kind of screaming with his mouth closed, if you can imagine, him really struggling to get away from this snake, but he couldn't take his helmet off because he'd die. Even though now there's a hole in his suit, so he would die anyway. But your instinct would be to try to get away from this here. I mean, in this final film, anyways, it didn't matter that they had their helmets on or not. So, so first idea, okay. Here's the first illustration I did that inspired that up there. And it also inspired this following sequence. Here I have the Hammerhead Snake. And this sequence, I wanted it to be this giant centipede that you're looking at this as the crew would in the film. I imagined that they would find the helmet of Fifield intact. And there's video on there that they would be able to download on the ship, and they would see all this when they got back to the ship. And the camera would be cutting in and out, so you would have video that was getting, that was broken, and you'd hear them screaming at, about what is happening here, and the camera would go out, it'd come back on, and broken video, and then you don't know what happened in between this shot and this one. But here, his arm is all swollen, and this thing is tightening. He's screaming. His suit is all torn. You could see something's happening to his body. And we cut again, and the last shot would be him screaming on the floor, looking at the floor as his head is just expanding out. Then we go to black. That would have been a really fun scene here. I think, and added a lot of energy to this whole area of the film. I think I just think it would have been cool. So another idea that wasn't used is this one, which you saw this, right? So this idea was when Holloway is coming back to the ship and he's been infected, right? And I know you guys have seen these images, so I'm not too worried that you got to see them, but I'm going to tell you about them now. Here, they kind of use this, right? When he's being driven back after they've gone out to look for Fifield and Milburn, they come back, and Holloway is, thanks to David, is, he's been infected, so he's, something's happening to him where his body is collapsing in on itself, or he's changing into something, right? And the black veins are, becoming like troughs more than veins. They're collapsing. And so that is a cool idea. But one of the original ideas was that, going back now to the film, when Holloway and Shaw are in a love scene, that while Holloway is on top of her, that he sits up, and they're in this whole love scene. I mean, right? And his chest is just pushed out, and it's really hurting him. It's all red and swelling, and he explodes while he's right on top of her. I mean, so these tentacles, everything, he's just ripped open, and this thing comes out. So it'd have been a horrific scene of this thing with pustules everywhere, and then one of the pustules explodes into this head that pushes out, which is obviously like the snake in Alien. So, but I mean, with all this stuff, this thing could literally become the beluga head or the deacon, which was the idea that I was pushing towards one of those two characters from this. That there would be a creature now on the ship that they would have to deal with. Would have been pretty cool. It would have been actually pretty cool if there was an actual creature on the ship that they had to deal with, in addition to the other stuff that happened in the haunted mansion of, of the complex of the engineers. So you could have had two stories working parallel to each other, and then them coming together by the third act. I think it would be kind of fun because then you'd have a lot of story going on, and I mean, it would have been epic, right? I mean, not to make it a shoot 'em up bang bang film again, like the Aliens movies, but a little higher minded version of those could have been pretty cool. But there it is. So that's it. That is the end of Creature Talk 3 and the end of the Prometheus Covenant series here. Originally, I decided to do this because I could see that there's a lot of Prometheus Covenant talks, blogs out there that I see, and I've seen a couple of them because I just like to watch them, and people make up all kinds of stuff. But I sensed some frustration in that they didn't really understand a lot of this stuff. So that prompted me to make the first one, and then I decided to do these subsequent two, Creature Talk 2 and 3, just to cover all the stuff in the film. But that being said, I hope you guys liked it, and if you did, let me know in the comments and the likes, because I'm not too sure I'm going to go on with these and do more. Although I enjoy it, it's a lot for me to talk about, right? I mean, I have to spend time in my workday to do these, and I want to know that people want to or like these, anyways. So, so thanks for listening. And again, if you guys aren't following me on my Instagram page, I am Carlos Huante on Instagram or Gallery Anatom on Instagram. And my website is Carlos Huante Monstro Art. If you just write that in, you'll find it. Careful, because there's a hacked version of my old website that they've turned into some sort of explicit porn site or something. And I've been trying to actually find a way to get rid of that altogether. But that website was decimated. And then they, what they do with the old website domains, they sell them if they've been canceled. So there's nothing I can do about that. So I'm just letting you all know, just to be warned, that there's something else out there with my name on it. Yeah, you can see all my website links anyways on my Instagram, and there's a Patreon page actually that you can follow. If you guys want to join me and see me draw there, you can. That's where all my drawing videos are going now. If I continue with this here on YouTube, they will all be available here. Yeah, I'll continue doing these for all the projects that I work on, but I'm not sure yet. So anyway, ramble. So thanks anyways, again, and hope that you guys come and listen to this a lot. Tell everyone to come in and check it out, so that way I'll feel like doing the rest if you want me to. Thanks.